I'm Derek Evernden, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to a special edition of the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you have a comment, criticism, or question, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. These podcasts are dedicated to the exhibitors who would have participated at the Edmonton Expo 2020. Edmonton Expo is an annual convention that celebrates the fun of pop culture, including comic book artists, writers, and creators from Canada and the United States. On this episode, I chat with Derek Evernden. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Derek has over 10 years of professional illustration, graphic design, and art direction experience. He has 9 years of fine art training, including a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. Derek is well experienced in traditional and digital illustration with a background in advertising art direction. And he's also the creator of Bogart Creek Daily Cartoons. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Derek Evernden.
Derek Evernden, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
My pleasure.
Appreciate your time. I usually start the interviews, ask the creator about their first comic book. So I'm wondering if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
I probably don't officially accurately remember, but I think it was, in the gas stations back in the day, they used to have sort of like a dual random comic pack that you could get where you buy one and there's something in this, in the same bag, there's one on the other side. And I think I picked up a ROM the Space Knight. And
oh, wow.
I think on the other side was called the Conqueror, but I don't remember or maybe it was called the Destroyer, but I don't remember what the actual issue numbers were. The one that I remember actually consciously buying when I was older was Web of Spider-Man #1. Cool. Probably before all of those, I'd read The Far Side in the newspaper, and then I started the gears turning and started me like shamelessly ripping them off, and and maybe Sick, Sick, Sick by Jules Pfeiffer.
Okay.
I remember my folks had that around the house, so kind of a long answer.
No, that's great. That's great. So that leads me to my next question about inspiration. And I'm wondering who or what inspires you to create your art today?
Well, obviously I have to start with Gary Larson, and I'm really thrilled that he's back and sharing new comics on his website. It's really interesting to see him, in today's context, because his work was so subversive when it first came out. And now, of course, it takes, you almost can't shock people anymore. But just knowing he's around is a great comfort. And he's just an obvious influence. I even thanked him in the acknowledgments of my first book. Chuck Jones is one that I have to give credit to, even though I often forget to mention him because he did animation and not comics. Mm-hmm. But, massive influence, both in terms of visual style, economy of line, conveying emotion and action without words, his twisted sense of visual humor, all that stuff. More recently, Tom Chaney is a cartoonist that I didn't really realize I knew until I started looking at his work. When I started publishing my own stuff, posting it on Instagram, he made some very kind, encouraging comments and suggestions and offered feedback. And so I started researching it a bit, and I realized that I'd seen his work everywhere. I was I admired the fact that he's somehow able to get in the New Yorker and Penthouse in the same lifetime. So that's, he seems to just be really bold and have no limits. I question some of my darker stuff, but when I had a comic recently I put on the back burner because I thought it would get too much of a backlash, and then like the next day I saw a comic by him on Instagram that was 10 times as shocking.
Oh my.
Yeah, so he's but then in the same breath he'll be in a book about philosophy. Yeah, he's got a hell of a career and scope. Obviously, Bill Watterson and Charles Adams, in terms of their style, are ones that I like. I wish I could draw like them. Jules Pfeiffer, I wish I could write dialogue like him. I tend to try and avoid as much dialogue as possible because it's I've got a tin ear, if that's the right term. And then lastly, Edward Steed, sort of the superstar of the New Yorker comics. I'm just totally jealous of his ideas and his unique illustration style. He's a genius.
Yeah, lots of good inspiration there, that's for sure.
Yeah. Although I'm always looking for a new single panel comic artist who will sort of create the same fervor that The Far Side did. And I think it's really weird that We've got lots of success we can point to with multi-panel comic strips, 4 or 5 panels, like a Perry Bible Fellowship would be sort of the most classic one. But then also you've got Nathan Pyle's Strange Planet most recently, which gets passed around like memes. And we have memes, which are very much like single panel comics, but we don't have anything in single panel comics that are really like catching on fire like Strange Planet did. And I don't know if it's like the genre, does the format itself is just really dated or something. It's weird. I don't know. So.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking to you and others under the context of the Edmonton Expo, which unfortunately didn't happen this year. So I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about what you were planning to exhibit at that show.
My next book, Bogart Creek Volume 2, due out this fall.
Now, for those not familiar with it, can you explain what Bogart Creek is all about?
Yeah, Bogart Creek is a single-panel comic of dark and absurd humor for our dark and absurd times. It's obviously it's got roots in the Far Side. It gets compared to the Far Side a lot, even though my visual style is nothing like Larson's. I wouldn't dare be one of those artists that tries to emulate him. But the comparisons are always made. I jump around in terms of topics and characters quite a lot. I try to avoid anything involving cows, but nonetheless. That's easy. It's the closest equivalent. Even it's been described as sort of the evolution of the Far Side, or the next or the dark side of the Far Side. I think someone said once. Yeah, so it's single panel comics with kind of an edgy, dark, twisted side to it.
Is that book available now?
Volume 2 isn't out yet. Well, pre-sales it is. Yeah, it's apparently you can pre-order it, but Volume 1 is the one that's out now. That came out last year. That was what I was taking around with me to the expos then.
Is it available online for people to purchase?
That's right. Yep. Well, Volume 1 is. Yeah, you can get it through bogartcreek.com. You can get it through Renegade Arts and Entertainment. That's my publisher. Fantastic publisher out of Canmore. You can, and from your local comic book shop, it would be, support local and order it through them. That'd be great.
Absolutely. I'm just mentioning Edmonton Expo. I presume that you've been there before, so I'm wondering if you have any favorite moments that you can share.
I guess one that it's kind of silly, but I don't nerd out for a lot of things. I'm not someone who's like a super fan of anything, but I'm a big Community fan, the TV show Community. Mm-hmm. I think it was at the Edmonton Expo, although I'm probably going to, after this interview, I'll look it up, and it was at the Calgary Expo instead. But I think there was a guy walking around as the Greendale Human Being, which is their mascot community college. And I had my Community shirt on, and I went up and got a photo with him, which was kind of a random occurrence. I didn't expect to see that show represented. I think there were some. I'm probably getting no. I was going to say that there were some gigantic Wookiees walking around on stilts, but I'm pretty sure that was at the Calgary Expo. That was pretty neat.
Great memories there, that's for sure. I want to switch gears slightly and talk about creative process. You were talking about single panel, and that to me seems a little bit tougher to do than multi-panel comics, because you have to compress so much into such tight space that there's no room for error. And I'm wondering if you could take me through how you go from initial concept to the finished work.
I find single panels to be easier to do. I actually tried doing a strip again recently, and I just wound up throwing out the first 3 panels and sticking with the last one, because I found the last one could just convey everything and leave the rest up to the viewer's imagination. Again, I'm pretty terrible at dialogue, so that's another reason why just cutting to that that key moment in the joke or in the little movie in your head is helpful. And the other thing I like about single panel comics is that you get a chance to just. I take a shotgun approach when I'm coming up with ideas, and if you're married to the same characters in every strip, I think there's probably some freedom in that, but I would also find that quite limiting. I just like random thoughts, and with single panel comics, the sky's the limit. You can just bounce around. You're not tethered to anything. There certainly are tropes to be aware of, and there's certain I think there's a limited number of types of jokes that gags that you can construct. There's certain little rules, like obviously when you're writing, if you have a verbal punchline or a written punchline, you got to save it for the very end of the sentence, that kind of thing. And there's also as many people I think pointed out, comedy comes in threes, so you'll have a rhythm in most single panel comics. very much like a strip, for that matter, or a play where you have 3 acts. You'll have 3 main beats. It's just in a single panel comic, as you said, they're compressed. So, in fact, I did a presentation at the Calgary Expo last year where I talked about single panel comics as legitimately comics, even though Scott McCloud has famously said that they're cartoons, they're not comics, because comics have to have sequential panels, one after the other, juxtaposed in sequence. And I basically took one of my comics and I took the 3 beats, zoomed in, pulled them apart, broke it up into 3 beats, and lo and behold, now it was a 3-panel comic, but it could all be shown inside one panel. The only thing is that your eye jumps between the 3 beats instead of separating it with gutters. It's when we read a book, we do that too, right? You go in a zigzag shape, So sticking to the 3 beats seems to be a good idea, and not holding the reader's hand, not holding the viewer's hand as much as possible, because you got to have that aha moment. It's actually almost like there's 4 beats. There's 1, 2, 3, aha, and then you laugh.
Right. Yeah.
I hope that's
put all the pieces together.
Yeah, and when I'm just coming up with ideas, I either write out a list of topics, like mowing the lawn, flying in a hot air balloon, or I just do stream of consciousness drawing. Sometimes if I'm really stuck, I'll just put on YouTube and just bounce around and just so that I don't go back over the same sort of topics again and again. And sometimes looking at philosophy books or something like that helps. You go at it from sort of a high concept approach. Yeah, just never know. I keep a lot of scraps of paper all over the house because I never know when I'm going to get inspired. Lately, though, I've been getting up and working in the morning more, and I'm finding that it's just more concentrated. I actually have a sketchbook now because I can just set aside that time of day to do it rather than just being scatterbrained all day.
And you're a traditional artist, correct?
Yeah, I was kind of a stickler for that when I started, and I had about 100 cartoons drawn before Bogart Creek launched on social media. Quickly burned through those, and now basically I draw. I release two new comics a week plus 1 throwback. So I'm putting out three jokes a week. I usually color the throwback just so that there's something new for people who have been following from the beginning. And that basically that translates to, I think, something like in the neighborhood of 18 jokes a month that I have to come up with, because 2/3 of them never make it off the cutting room floor. So, yeah, it's sorry, I've gone up and rambled. What was the original question there?
No, I was curious to know you use traditional tools rather than digital.
My whole point was that I have to crank them out so fast that I found that I'm totally on the iPad Pro now. Just
okay.
I'm all digitally. Yeah. I love traditional, and I find it very meditative when I have that luxury. And it sucks that if I ever get famous or something, they won't be able to do any auctions of my art. But I'm just mostly interested in getting as much good quality stuff out there, and that means being quick and going for volume. And the iPad Pro is a godsend. I mean, I use Fresco. Their brushes are really natural, and you can get I don't think you can easily tell the difference between what's done with traditional media now and what's not. And myself from 4 years ago, I feel this is a betrayal, but I'm just being pragmatic.
Sure, you got to get it done quickly, so that's the digital is the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for the traditional, because there more mistakes get left in. It's a lot harder to leave mistakes in when you can just have unlimited undos, and the mistakes do make it funnier most of the time. So I look back on like a lot of the jokes that are in my first book, and they're done with just a crappy felt tip pen, and some of the drawings are just horrendous, but they make it funnier than if it was perfectly polished. I always make the comparison between a comedian who looks like he does sit-ups every day, and shaves and everything, versus a comedian who's out of shape and losing his hair. Who's going to be funnier, right?
Right. No, interesting. Now, you've talked about Bogart Creek Volume 2 coming out shortly, but I'm wondering if there's any other projects in the works that you can talk about.
Only vaguely in the works. I mean, I've been kicking around a sci-fi horror story for a while. It would be just like a legit graphic novel about a guy who gets kidnapped by a shady organization, and They take his brain out and put it in that body of a giant genetically engineered pig. I don't want to give anything more away than that, but it's suffice to say it's a story of revenge. And then another one that I've just started working on is sort of, I love birds and birding. I'm thinking about a book about birding on an alien planet, which is really just an excuse for me to draw alien birds. But,
well, they both sound very intriguing. Where can people find you online to find out more about your forthcoming projects?
Again, my publisher, Renegade Arts Entertainment. My website is bogartcreek.com. There's always links to my Instagram page there. Instagram and Facebook where I post most of my jokes, although I do try to spread the love around on like Imager and sometimes Reddit. Yeah, I'd go with bogartcreek.com or at bogartcreek on Instagram. Publisher, Renegade Arts Entertainment.
Nice. Well, Derek, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
Thank you for doing this follow-up for the Edmonton Expo. I really appreciate it. It's a drag that we didn't all get together, but it's amazing that we can do so much online. Hopefully next year we'll get to meet up in person.
Thanks to Derek for the chat. You can discover more about Derek on Instagram at Bogart Creek and online at DerekEvernden.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at TrueNorthComics. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2020.